Hey guys, this is Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. Just before I start, it's almost 10 o'clock as I record this, so if I don't seem that much energetic, it's because of that. This is a movie I finished watching about 30 minutes ago. Reason I waited a while before recording is because I wanted to let the movie sink in a little bit. It's the sequel to the movie I reviewed last time, Tron, and the film is Tron Legacy. Now, almost 30 years after the original comes out, they make a sequel. Now, as you guys know, last time I went into a little bit of detail on how I was introduced to the Tron films. Tron series, I should say. Well, I think it was around the time that they put the Tron level in Kingdom Hearts 2 that they actually started talking about doing a sequel, and I think it was in 2008, if I remember correctly. I'm going to check development real quick. When it was that they announced it. Yeah, it was at 2008 at Comic-Con that they showed test footage, which I did watch, and that test footage was cool. And it was from there, when it got good feedback, that they started developing the film that we got. And as you guys can probably tell, I enjoyed the film. But here's what I'll say. With how the final film is, this is a sequel that you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. I mean, even critics are like that. There are critics that like it and there are critics that hate it. And there might be some critics that like parts of it and hate other parts, but I like the film. I only have a couple of minor complaints about it that will be addressed throughout this film. But I will say, for me at least, this is a sequel that at least, well, it doesn't surpass the original. It at least, I'm trying to think of the proper term. I don't know if live up would be the proper term, because that would mean it's almost as good. I think does justice, I think, would probably be a adequate term, or maybe it's what you could hope for in a Tron sequel or something. Maybe not everyone, but it's what I would hope for. I mean, you got basically some of the stuff from the first movie done with today's technology and some other stuff. Now, the plot is that it begins in 1989, so 7 years after the first film takes place. Kevin Flynn is now a father. We don't find out right away, but apparently his wife died a few years after the first film. We never find out who his wife is, but I'm going to guess it was Laura, I think was the female character's name from the first movie. I know her. I just flipped my mind. I know it was an L. That means she'd have to have dumped dumped Alan to go back with Flynn, but it's possible. She died somehow, and now Kevin not only is running Incom, but he is raising their son Sam. Now, one night he just disappears all of a sudden, and Sam is now left with all of Flynn's earnings, and he is the top shareholder in the company. 20 years pass. Sam is still the majority shareholder of the company, but he doesn't run it. He just lets proxy runners run it, and the only interest he really takes in the company is an annual prank that he pulls on them, which this year's prank is that he spoils their unveiling of a new product, which it kind of looks like he's trying to steal it at first, but it's just funny as hell. But and then, of course, like we see in the trailer, Alan tells him that he got a page from his father's number and that had been disconnected for 20 years to go to the arcade that we saw in the first movie, which that set does look like. If that's the same set, I would be very surprised. Usually sets are destroyed, so if it is the same set, cool. If not, then they really paid attention to detail in the first movie when they recreated it. Well, he goes there, and through a couple of tinkerings, he finds himself in the grid, the world that we see in the first movie. Only now, it's a lot more grand. I mean, if you were to think of it in terms of this. The grid world of the original film is the old school effects era grid. This is the new school effects era grid. It's a lot more intense, there's a lot more going on, and the world is bigger. I mean, the old school era one, I do like the way it looks, you know, the kind of the black and white color feel to it. But for the time it's impressive, and it still is impressive today, but it doesn't really seem that much alive. This one seems more alive. That one seems like a small town. This one seems like a big city, at least with how many people you see around. And there is a lot of CGI used in this film, I will say, but this is one of those films where a lot of CGI usage doesn't bother me. Because think of it, it's a world inside of a computer. That's kind of hard to fully replicate with practical effects. I mean, I know there's like some practical effects in there, because something I saw on Stars where they mentioned that they actually did use actual sets, but they did the Star Wars method, to where certain parts are set and then stuff they couldn't do in camera. Like, for example, one set we see later on in the movie, that it's basically like a house set that looks out onto the grid. The grid part would be CGI'd in. The only Star Wars one that off the top of my head that I could think of is that hill that Anakin burns on, where it's a practical hill, but obviously the background of the lava CGI'd in, something like that. But anyway, and you can really see that the money, it cost $170 million for this movie to make. You can see the money went to the effects, because the CGI, I wouldn't say it looks really cheap. It looks pretty good. I want to know though how much the actors got paid, so we can deduct, I mean, that from the $170 million, and see how much of that went to the effects. I'm just curious. But the effects, pretty good. And if you remember the irony I mentioned in the review of the first film, that they didn't give that film, the original Tron, an Academy Award nomination for effects because they cheated in computers. What they said. Well, look, now your computers are commonplace, so it's only kind of fitting that Tron gets the treatment that it helped start in a sequel. Now, when he arrives, just like his father before him, he's scooped up, mistaken for a program, and taken to compete in the games. Now, when his father was sent in, of course, remember the master computer, and then I always forget the lackey's name. Whatever the lackey's name is, they know he's a user, but no one else does. They think he's a program. This time, it's not until he bleeds that they find out he's a user. And the guy running it this time is none other than Clu. You remember the program that we see at the beginning of the first movie, only this is a recreation one. Just using the same program, different one. It's like if you have two copies of the same song and you delete one and then you have the other. And Clu, as we find out throughout the film, he's the main villain, and he basically took over the grid, because as we find out, Flynn, after the event of the first movie, started tinkering a lot with the grid, and it basically was his dream or something to like bring people into the grid or something. It's a very complicated plan, and it's one of the things that is kind of explained vaguely. It's explained sort of through visuals and sort of through dialogue, but I never really got fully grasped what Flynn's plan was. It doesn't bother me though, but it's like he had so many big ideas and stuff that he was not able to comprehend them all, like bringing people into the grid, bringing programs out. It's just a lot of crazy stuff, but it would take a lot of time and energy, which that would explain why he's still working on it about 7 years out of the first movie. It's a big plan, and that's what Clu was actually programmed to do, to help him with it. Clu and Tron were supposed to be helping him, and Clu did a coup d'etat, but that's one thing about it, is they never explain why Clu did a coup d'etat. They kind of hinted it was probably the way he was programmed, that he probably saw Flynn as a danger and decided to rebel before it was too late. But I actually have a theory, because they never fully state it. My theory for it is that somewhere in the grid there were data bytes that were the remains of the master computer, and that when Clu was made, or as he existed, somehow they got into his programming and they messed up with him a little bit, maybe like tinkering at him, you know, kind of the whole Whisper Devil thing, and maybe that's why. But remember, that's just my thought. And now while I'm still on the subject of Clu, I actually don't mind Jeff Bridges' performance as Clu, and of course as Flynn. The only problem I have with the performance is at the very beginning, it's obvious CGI in his face. I mean, they could have used them. I don't know why they didn't use a makeup effect to make him look younger, because if you can make someone look older, I think you can make him look younger. Like, get like sort of latex skin like you do with the older one, just make it look younger. It'd look a lot better than the CGI, because it's actually in camera, maybe like touch it up with makeup. I would prefer that. That's the one bit of CGI in the film I do mind. They do it in the flashbacks in the grid world, but there it actually looks like it's in place, so it doesn't really bother me as much. But as I was saying, his performances as Clu and Flynn It doesn't bother me. His performance in the first film is still better, but I like him. If I have to say which character do I like him better as Clue, he is basically like sort of a dictator, but a dictator that has the approval of the populace. I guess you could compare him to a little bit like how Adolf Hitler was before World War II started, how he was a dictator, but the people loved him. It's only after World War II that people started to hate him as it went on. And you can tell at first that he's kind of bored, because when you first see him, he's just sitting a little bit like this. Maybe he's been waiting. I'm not going to spoil what for, because as you find out later on, some stuff I don't want to spoil, plot-related spoilers. But you can tell he's waiting for something. And as Flynn, he's basically like a guru guy, into all that Zen and Chi stuff, and he's kind of cool there. And you know who he reminds me a lot of? He reminds me a lot of The Dude. I haven't seen that movie, but I hear that's what The Dude is. That's basically, it's Kevin Flynn as The Dude. I am The Dude. That's one of the first things I heard about the performance, and I have to say, it doesn't really bother me. It's interesting to see that in the world, especially with all the hacking stuff he does. And there's one thing his character does later on in the movie that a line from Jurassic Park 2 came to mind when it happened. Violence and technology, not good bedfellows. Now, I haven't talked about him yet, but Garrett Hedlund, he's the guy that plays Adult Sam in the movie. I felt he did an interesting job. I'm checking to see what else he's been in real quick. Okay, he was in Troy. Oh, he's the guy that played Murtaugh in Aragon. I liked it. I thought he did a decent job there. I could see him as Murtaugh there, and I liked him here in Tron Legacy. He was also in Four Brothers, but he did a good job. And I will say that when him and dang it, bad. Wondering my internet was lagging. Him and Jeff Bridges, I buy them as father and son when they interact. Granted, they were estranged, but you can, when they first see each other for the first time again, I bought from that alone that they were father and son. And of course, they introduced something new into the movie called ISOs, which they kind of are vague on it, but there's basically supposed to be something like the humans have been waiting for a long time to find. Maybe like the things that help breathe life into it. It's kind of vague on it. I'm guessing if they do another film, they'll probably explain it a little bit more. They're introduced, and also a new character is introduced called Quora, if I'm pronouncing her name right. And if she is played by Olivia Wilde, who those of you who watch House will remember as 13. And if I remember correctly, I think this was her first big movie, because she left the show for a little bit to film this movie and then a couple other movies, and because of her success so far, that's why she left the show, which I have to say is probably a good thing, because the show's probably going to end after this season, most likely. And I don't want to say that because I like the show, but probably for the best, because Fox is now, they're starting to be dicks now, because all because of them. Lisa Edelstein left because of pay disputes. I mean, they wanted everyone to take a pay cut. There's going to be a minor rant on Fox. Fox, as the show gets older, you're supposed to pay your actors more, not ask them to take a pay cut. If you didn't want to pay them more, why didn't you just ask them to stay on at the same rate? Steal something from my late grandpa? Yeah, when I'm doing rants, that'll probably be part of my thing now. What are you, ignorant? But anyway, I didn't really mind her performance. I thought she did pretty good job for a role like this, because I don't think she's really done that much acting stuff that requires some action stuff. I'm gonna go check her filmography real quick. Let's see. She was in The Girl Next Door. She was in Alpha Dog. Year One as a Princess. Ballad of G.I. Joe was a video short. Mostly it was small roles before this. This was actually her first movie role where it was more of a starring role, I think. Then of course, you know, this year she was in Cowboys and Aliens, and from the trailer we get she is naked in the movie. So 1+ that movie's probably gonna have. Like I said, I enjoyed her performance in the movie, but everyone who's seen the movie or who knows that little thing that happens at the end, I've heard about that before I saw the movie, and I'm like, how the heck does that happen? But then as I've watched the movie, it explains it a little bit more, so I buy it now. I'm not gonna say what it is for those of you who haven't seen the movie, but let's just say I'll buy it. And checking to see. Now, of course, one of my minor complaints: the fact that Tron, our title character, hardly in the movie at all. I mean, his user self, Alan, is in the movie in a couple scenes, like at the beginning at the board meeting, then of course telling Sam about the thing, and then we see him at the end. But Tron is only in 2 scenes: a flashback and then near the end. And then he kind of is wasted, even after he gets back to normal and goes, "I fight for the users." It's kind of wasted. I'm like, you fight for the users and you're barely fighting? You know, wasted. What happened to the Tron that we saw in the first movie? The kicking ass, taking names Tron. I mean, we see him when he's evil, but we don't see him when he's back to senses. Yes, Tron's evil in this movie. I'm not going to explain why, but it's just one of the things. Hopefully, if they make another movie, which now I hear that they actually were. At first, they didn't want to do a sequel. The movies, they thought it underperformed, but now Disney, in their wisdom, is making another one, and I actually would look forward to another one. Hopefully, if they do it in 3D, they actually film it in 3D from the start if they want to release it, and not convert it after the fact, because when Efrey and I talked about this movie, he's not a fan of this movie, which, it's okay. Like I said, this movie, you either like it or hate it, but he hated the theater experience because he paid to see it in 3D, and then a little notice at the beginning, even though this movie was shot in 2D, it was shown in 3D. I'm like, what kind of crap is that? You're advertising in the movie that you did not shoot it in 3D. And Disney, if there's any of the movies you're filming that you want to release in 3D that you would shoot in 3D, don't you think it'd be the movie that the majority of it takes place inside of a computer? Now, like I said earlier, this is a sequel that I think is enjoyable. There's only one thing about the movie that I think is better than the original, and that is the score. Because you remember, I didn't really remember much about the score. I mean, I can't remember much about the score here, but it just seemed a bit more emotional, a bit more epic in parts. It just seemed, well, this is a more action-oriented movie, maybe that's why, but just fit a little bit more. Now, the climax of the movie, I'm not really going to spoil a lot about it, but it's just, it leaves a little bit to be desired, I will say. I mean, nothing like in the, there's actually kind of a self-sacrifice thing like in the original, and only this time it actually is a sacrifice. Not going to say how, but it's kind of cool how it's done, like a big sonic boom. And of course, you know, the whole thing. And, one thing I like to, this is a little thing, apparently Dillinger Brett had a kid as well. Flynn can't outdo him, but it makes me wonder, who did Dillinger breed with? Wouldn't he be in jail after the events of the first movie for a little bit? Or maybe he had the son beforehand, we never know. It never explains how old that Dillinger is supposed to be. And, like I said, Laura, as my guess, is who Sam's mother is, because we never see her at all. They never mention her at all. Trying to think if there's any other thing about the movie I want to, because I don't want to forget anything. Oh yeah, the programs. There's a variety of programs in this, and there's more. There's actually another outfit color. There's white program colors now. Because remember, in the first movie we only had blue and we had red. Now we still have those two, but we also got white program ones, which never specifically states what type of programs they're supposed to be or why they're like that. We only see 5 of them like that. One of the 4 female ones, and then one of them is a guy that we see works at a bar, or the computer equivalent of a bar. My guess is that they're special ones that Clue picked out or something. It never explains why they're like that. Because every other one is like normal. And the thing I will say, this is kind of what I said earlier about it being more grand in scale, the grid. It kind of feels a little bit like going in with the dictatorship thing. It does kind of feel like a I always try to pronounce this one. Despoian. I always try to pronounce the word. Hopefully I'll just use Google. See if I can find the word first. Despotin, I think is what it is. No, I think that's it. No, I know what Hold on. Sorry if this is gonna... Okay, sorry that this is gonna be a little bit of a break, but I'm trying to find the freaking word. Where is the word? And no, it's not bird. Here it is. Dystopian. Dystopian, that's what it is. It's basically kind of like, feels like a dystopian society, because you see a bunch of the guards walking around, and then we see some people on the streets, some of them kind of hiding a little bit. We don't see, it's not really touched on that much, but you get that feeling, so it kind of does tie in a little bit with the dictatorship angle a little more, which I like that little touch. And after watching the movie, I get the subtitle Legacy a lot more. It's kind of a deep thing, because the grid, Flynn wanted it to be his legacy, Clue took in, and now he's trying to make it his legacy, and then of course, after what happens at the end, now Sam's going to try to fulfill his dad's dream or something, never build a legacy of his own along with Cora. So it's kind of a deep subtitle, and I don't mind the use of it. Now my final rating for Tron Legacy, I give it a 4 out of 5. You see, a whole point lower than the previous one. Like I said, for me it was an enjoyable sequel, but not everyone will like it. It's going to be one you either like or hate. I still say if you haven't seen it and you're a fan of the first movie, give it a watch. But no, going in, it's not going to be as good as the original one, obviously. And like I mentioned, there was those couple of things, the CGI face at the beginning, Tron not being in it that much, so if you're expecting to see a lot of Tron and you haven't seen the movie, go into it knowing he's not going to be in there a lot. And like I said earlier, if they made another sequel, I wouldn't mind. But what would the subtitle be? Well, will they just give up and do, well, let's just call it Tron 3.